Welcome to the Woman Aesthetic Podcast. Join us in seeking deeper meaning and striving to live fully in our womanhood. Welcome to the Woman Aesthetic Podcast, where we discuss essence, personhood, and the role of women. I'm your host, Anna. Today, I will be speaking with Sofia Cuddeback on whether women as the heart of the home are, by extension, parts of their communities and society, and what change can women bring to their communities. Sofia Fedoryka Cuddeback is a homemaker and a maker and teacher of music. Still homeschooling the last of 6 children, she welcomes the arrival of grandchildren. Sofia and her husband, John, collaborate at lifecraft.org, where their writings, videos, and podcasts address the challenges of renewing life in the home. Sofia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Anna. It's just really a delight to be here with you today.
Well, I'm finally getting to talk to you. I am so excited about that. I am a big fan of your podcast, which is The Internal Household, a Lifecraft podcast. And you talk about what it means for women to be the heart of the home in one of your earlier episodes. And I would encourage people to go listen to the podcast episode just to get the full scope of that concept. But if you could give us a definition or summary, what does being the heart of the home mean? And why women specifically? Why can't men be the heart of the home?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, of course, the word heart of the home, it's not obviously a literal description, it's a figurative description. And so if we think about what heart means when we talk about having a heart for someone, something touching your heart, we're talking about the affective sphere of a human being, that part that's moved through beauty, that part of us that's moved through compassion, that part of us that can be attentive to other people's needs. And so in that sense, we use the expression woman as the heart of the home because a woman's particular gift and charism is precisely that, to be able to see people kind of in their inner meaning, to receive them, to make a space for them, not just physically and biologically in our bodies, but through a kind of an understanding and insight into the person. And so a woman has this special capacity to be precisely that, the heart of a home for all those who are there present. So first and foremost for your husband, and then of course for your children by extension, and then anyone else that is welcomed into that home, whether it's grandparents or other relatives, or even if there's someone who works in the home. This is a particular place where a woman can extend that heart to anyone who's part of the home. And I would even add to the physical distribution of your home. So even the physical decoration, she is the heart for those things within the home and has a particular gift to draw out something special in all of those areas.
I think that is so beautiful. And you put it so well because you incorporate the feeling that's important in the home, the feeling that people get when they enter your home. But there's a lot of obviously physical effort that goes into that, apart from involving our emotions. And I find it so interesting that women really do have a way of kind of changing the atmosphere of when they're there. And how is that different from a man doing that? Being able to change that atmosphere.
Of course, when we say, that woman is heart of the home, that's not to say that she has exclusive rights to the functions of the heart. So of course, men are loving and attentive, and they're able to care for the people within their home in a very particular way that, of course, takes a kind of an insight into the person as well. And so this is not to say that men don't have an affective side. They certainly do. And their role in the home obviously demands a certain affective side from them. But I think women have a very particular ability to have an insight into the person. So if you think about it, and of course, these are generalizations. And so different men and different women have these characteristics in different degrees. But just to start from the generalization might help us kind of see some of the difference. Men are very good at organizing the big picture. And in order to be able to organize the big picture, you actually have to scroll away a little bit from the personal. So whereas what a woman's gift is to precisely dial into the personal and really see the persons. And so if a woman is really faithful to that gift that she has, then everything that she arranges and orchestrates within the home is with an eye toward the persons. And I think that's why she has a very special capacity of welcoming people into her home, whether it's children or guests through hospitality. It's because she's seeing the persons and she arranges the atmosphere or the environment, if she's really being true to her and most faithful to her vocation, what it means to be a woman. She's orchestrating the environment to really draw out the people that she's welcoming, to enter in and to help them feel seen and loved. And so I think that's partially why we have that feeling in a truly generous woman's home of being welcomed in and brought in and enveloped and affirmed.
Yes, I love how you used that phrase "draw out," because I
Mhm.
was just thinking, when someone brings you your problems, a woman is, like, tell me all about it. Let me sit
Yeah.
here with you with this problem, or even the good thing. And while you tell a man the problem, and they're like, okay, let me help you fix it. They're not
Fix it.
exactly like,
Yeah.
let me draw it out of you. Let me, sit with
Yeah.
you. And I mean, some men
Yeah.
for sure do that, but I think the
Mhm.
first instinct for women is not like, all right, let's get a game plan, go it, like we really
Yeah.
are like, let's just be here together. I think that's
Yeah.
so beautiful and so important, especially when you have children. Sometimes they just need someone to really be there with them, and their feelings and what
Absolutely.
they're going through, because they don't know how to do that yet, especially in the
Absolutely.
beginning. So,
Yeah. It's interesting the comparison that you brought up that a man wants to just solve a problem when he hears it. He's not particularly looking to go in and experience it with you the way a woman is. And you brought up children, and I think it's very interesting. And a lot of psychologists have said this before, that the young child really needs the mother's presence, because it's the mother's presence and her gaze and her ability to draw them out that actually gives them a sense of who they are and a kind of security that's incredibly important for the type of development that happens in a very young child. And then as children get older and they're more in their teen years, they really need the father, his presence in precisely that, solving problems, arranging the environment. Where are we going from here? What's our goal? What's our game plan? What's our goal? So, it's a beautiful thing how God designed it so that children really need the mother and the father together. And just at different points, one of the parents suits the need more than the other parent.
mhm. Yeah, and I love that, like you said, God did it so beautifully because as they get older, they need a little bit of that, the taste of the world challenging them,
Yes.
and the father bringing
Yes.
that out, in a safe way, in a really good way, just giving them that challenge, something to jump to, while the mom is always, the mother's always there to welcome them back when they're
Yeah.
tired, when they need
Yeah.
that, recharge and things. I think that is so beautiful.
For
Um,
sure.
well, I mean, we see, I think, so much pushback from society and from the media,
Mhm.
especially if you go online. A lot of people are on Instagram and all of those apps, and we see so much pushback from society and the media when women are encouraged to be a heart of the home. And
Mhm.
people, I think, are quick to say, well, that's not all women can do. We can do so
Mhm.
much more. And while I absolutely agree that women can do a multitude of things, but when I hear someone say that, it sounds like they're alluding to the fact that they don't see this job as hard or very very important, almost like it's
Mhm.
lacking in some way. So, for instance, I don't see them kind of jumping on that, when women are encouraged only to have a career in the same way.
Sure.
So that's just kind of the context of where my mind's at. So,
Yeah.
what is your opinion on that, and why is the position of the heart of the home, why isn't it broadly valued?
Yeah. I that's a great point. That's a really difficult issue. And one of the things that comes to my mind when you bring that up is that the denigration of the job or the profession of woman as homemaker. It's really interesting because it's become the lingo of a certain set of people.
Mm,
And I think there are a lot of people who don't feel that. They don't feel like being a homemaker is a degradation of the woman or a limitation. And yet, kind of the common parlance in the public sphere is, oh, women are capable of so much more than that. And so I just want to say, that is a narrow group of people. That's their description.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be careful that we don't take that on as the description, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we remember that is a certain set of people's opinion about the matter. Unfortunately, they're very vocal
Mm-hmm.
and they get a lot of press. And so it gives kind of the appearance as though this is the universal judgment. This is a real judgment. So first of all, it's just that is a limited and narrow take on what it means to be the heart of the home. Also, I think part of the reason that, so you were saying, why is this the case? Why is it that women are encouraged to have careers, but it's considered a bad thing when they're encouraged to be homemakers? So first of all, you said that one of the responses when someone wants to be a homemaker is, oh, women are capable of so much more. Well, being a homemaker isn't saying that you're not capable of anything else. So in that statement, there's an assumption that says you're a homemaker because you can't do anything else. So I want to point out that fallacy, first of all. To encourage women to be a homemaker is not saying she's not capable of anything else, therefore she must be a homemaker. So, first of all, because I know a lot of homemakers who are incredibly gifted, talented people who share their gifts and talents, first and foremost, with a small unit that's given to them, their spouse and their children. And let's face it, in a world where people are feeling so disenfranchised, where people are feeling so isolated and abandoned, if you can do that for one or two people, or three or four, or however many God gives you to be part of your family, you have done an infinite thing. If those few people that are given to you feel seen, feel loved, feel affirmed, this is making these people, giving them a foundation to have full, healthy, abundant, prosperous lives. It's kind of an essential. So just from that perspective, in the world that we're living in, being a homemaker is doing an amazing thing for a small group of people, but it ripples outward too. So, of
Exactly.
course, being that heart of the home continues to ripple out. So, and the talents and gifts that women have, like prodigious ones in a lot of cases, when they limit them to the home rather than something that has kind of an economic outcome, it's not a limitation. It's not a degradation. It's using it for a very good purpose. Um, and you said, why is it that people don't give enough credit to the homemaking job? And I just want to say, or let's call it vocation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe people like the word profession better because it sounds a little bit more like has more clout, a little bit more importance.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say, I feel like the reason that part of the reason it's so hard for the world that we live in to not appreciate the role of the homemaker is we live in an extremely materialist world. And what I mean by that is that it's not just that we're consumers, and we certainly are,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
more than any other generation. I think we are primarily consumers. I don't mean necessarily consumers, although that's part of materialism. I think the materialist tendency of the world is only our experience has become so narrow that what we really experience is what we touch and see and feel and taste. And it's just things, and it's material objects. Whereas in previous generations, there was this kind of awareness of spiritual goods. Even something as, if you go all the way back to the pagans, if they said rosy fingered dawn, it's a kind of seeing there's something behind the rising of the sun that is so profound and moving, and we can't quite put our finger on it. And the contemporary world is kind of a description of combustion of gases and so forth. You give a scientific description, we're so advanced. We don't call it rosy finger dawn anymore. I think we've lost something. So we fail to see the spiritual significance behind the material things. And I think that's part of the reason why being a homemaker is so underappreciated. So much of what a woman does in a home is not quantifiable. It can only be really understood from the perspective of spiritual goods, seeing a person, making a person feel comfortable, making them feel secure, educing their personality, bringing it out of them through encouragement and understanding. These are not material things, they're spiritual goods. And so they're very hard to quantify. And we do live in a world that likes to quantify everything. How much does it cost? How much did you make? How many viewers do you have? How many listeners? How many subscribers? I mean, everything. I mean, starting from a very young age, what grade did you get? Like, how many points did you get right? Who came in first? We don't care who's the silver medalist. We just want to know who the gold medalist is, right? So we're super, super outcome oriented. And you just can't measure what motherhood does, what being a homemaker does in terms of quantifiable numbers. And so it's not just that people don't appreciate the role of homemaker, it's almost like we've lost the tools to be able to measure what it is.
Hmm.
So I think that's part of why we have this struggle here.
Yes, no, absolutely. And you bringing up the fact that it is so linked to the spiritual, and we've lost the spiritual in our society. I mean, the
Mhm.
right spiritual, I would say. Um, and so now people are trying to measure it in other ways, which is,
Sure.
the economic, or, well, my efforts, a mother works 24/7. So that would be this many dollars, just like I
Yeah.
see all that.
Valuing
And
it that way. Yeah.
exactly. And I remember
Yeah.
thinking like, oh my goodness, yes, like I totally feel that. Like it's so valid. But then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, why do I have to feel like I got to present that in
Hmm.
motherhood,
Hmm.
or as a homemaker, like, why do I have to be like,
Hmm.
well, if I work 24/7, almost like I needed to prove. And I think it is because so many people, like you said, they've lost the spiritual, they've lost a way, that the true way to measure it, that
Yeah.
now it's just this competition that really is not on the same playing field, because it's not about the same things. It's not about bringing
Sure.
economic growth. It's about nurturing souls and, you know, getting people developing people in the right way, their minds and their hearts. And that's so different. How are you supposed to measure that? Unless, you see the
Yeah.
child at 18, or you see your husband and your wife at the end of their life, and you see their marriage, like you
Sure.
can't really measure that
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. And I would just add, I mean, I would just want to underscore for our listeners that when you say spiritual, you're not referring specifically to religion. Like very often, spiritual is used to express religion. And of
Hmm.
course, it is that. And of course, the religious aspect is very important and significant. But I think what we mean when we're saying spiritual is non material realities.
Hmm.
So things like kindness, love, justice, generosity, self sacrifice. These are
Hmm.
all spiritual realities that aren't specifically connected to religion, although, of course, good religions encourage those things, that
Hmm.
they're just part of what it means to be human, that's really essential to who we are, that's not material. And I think that's what we're beginning to lose through this incredibly materialist age that we're living in. Although ironically, I think the thing that's kind of the nail in the coffin here is the disembodiment of the technological sphere. More and
Hmm.
more people are on their virtual devices rather than in contact with reality. And so, ironically, on the one hand, we're more materialist. On the other hand, we've actually lost touch with the material. And so, I think we have less of a sensitivity to these spiritual goods that are really what it means to be human.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Well, do you think that because women have this, I think a lot of what we've been talking about is this feminine genius, right? That
Mhm.
Pope John Paul II kind of, I don't know if he's coined it, or, just kind of put in a certain way. Um,
Yeah.
but do you think women are called to be the hearts of their communities and their
Mhm.
societies, to bring back all these things that we're kind of losing and are slipping from our hands? And I mean, if so, what does that mean? What would that look like?
Yeah, yeah. I think certainly by extension, we are called to be the heart of the community. I mean, of course, it's always a question of circles of degrees of closeness to you. And there are those that you are more responsible to, and then you continue to work outwards, right? So, although I truly believe if you are faithful in the closest circle that you're responsible for, it begins to ripple out. Um, I There's a really wonderful book called A Sixpence in Her Shoe by a woman named Phyllis McGinley. It came out in I think maybe 1970 was the year that it came out, and it was on the New York Times bestseller list. And it's all about the art of homemaking. She was a really well-known and prominent poet and author, and had many best-selling books. And she came out and wrote this wonderful book about it. In her introduction, she says, women are the custodians of culture. So
Mm.
it's kind of, and the way she describes it, she said, human beings were nomads until the woman tended the hearth. Then men wanted to come back to a particular place. And that's how civilization started. And so, and it's kind of a little bit of a tongue in cheek way of describing it. But basically, she goes on to say that hearth that women tend, and let's not again be overly materialistic. It's not just the tending of a fire. It's actually being present with the warmth of your heart to receive people back. It's not just the fire that calls people back, but it's the consistent presence of a heart that receives people is what gives rise to culture. And so I think in the age that we live in right now, what it means to be a custodian of culture is for that feminine genius, that heart that overflows to her family, overflows into the community. And there are many ways. And so, we're talking about families because that's kind of the most obvious natural place where the feminine genius gets to express itself. But of course, there are many women who aren't married and who don't have a family. And that doesn't exclude them from this feminine genius, nor does it exclude them from the contribution they have to make to society as a woman. So that feminine genius is something that resides in women, whether or not it's fulfilled in marriage and children. And so a woman who's not married also has that feminine genius, which is the gift to see persons and bring them out. And if we remember that, anywhere we go in our communities, no matter what position we hold in those communities, if you're working in the workforce, a 9-to-5 job, maybe you're working in IT, there's just something about that that's so like cold and bare. And where does a woman's heart get to transform that? It's completely different how a woman interfaces with IT than a man. And they might be
Mm-hmm.
actually technically doing the same thing, but in the end, the people the woman comes in contact with inevitably in her work become the people that she sees, that she has the gift to bring out. This is what makes a woman so impactful in any community if she's true to her vocation. The difficulty of women in the workforce is not that they're not competent to do that, but the workforce is primarily product driven,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of measured by success and by kind of standards of production, which kind of in a way is antithetical to the personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. We've got to get this out. It doesn't matter. We've got to make this benchmark, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it can invariably push a woman to have to stifle that part of her that has a genius for seeing people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difficulty of the woman in the workplace, is that it's actually not conducive to fostering what is in fact her genius and strength. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important if women kind of are aware that they have this and are able to foster and grow this strength in themselves through an awareness and practicing it in other areas, that she always bring this into the workplace. No
Mm-hmm.
matter how much her environment might be trying to pound it out of her, she needs to stay true to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that wherever the encounter with persons happens, she sees the person, she draws them out.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a very short business encounter that is completely changed because of the tone of voice someone uses in greeting
Mm-hmm.
or taking leave of. And so I really feel that there is a way that women are present in the workforce as well that makes them the heart of that cubicle, that team, that corporation.
Mm-hmm.
We really can make a difference, but we have to be true to this notion of having a genius of seeing people and their
Mm-hmm.
inner needs and bringing them out.
Yes. Oh, that is so great. I'm so glad you said that because that's something that no one says. nowadays, that you should be warm toward people in your workplace. You should be welcoming. You should be that person that greets them
Mhm.
with a smile or whatever it is. I think you went
Yeah.
into better, deeper examples. I remember before I was married, there was a lot of, and it was interesting. I was getting from everybody, even people that, I was going to looking up to and be like, okay, well, what should I do with this? It was a lot of like, do what makes you happy, look out for
Mm.
you, like focus on
Mhm.
you, focus. And I'm like, okay, focus on me. What does that mean? And it was a lot
Mhm.
of do things for you. And I'm like,
Mm.
but a woman, we're, how we flourish, like you said, the feminine genius like focuses on the person. So yes, there's
Mhm.
things that I think we need to cultivate in ourselves, but so that we can serve, which I know people hate that, oh my goodness,
Mhm.
we serve other people. I think there's also a lot of misconception about that, but just being
Mhm.
able to be there for other people. So
Mhm.
what can women cultivate in themselves to truly be women in the workplace, in
Mhm.
their communities? Like, are there some things that you see there that women really should focus on?
So, one of the characteristics of femininity that really strikes me is an ability to be vulnerable. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's part of what makes her be able to be heart of the home. It's not that just that she sees others, but she is able to be vulnerable in a way that allows them to enter in and share her life as well. Being vulnerable is exceedingly difficult. And of course, it's a very, very scary thing. We live in a world where there are no set in place cultural protections for certain demographics of people. So there was a time when women were respected in a kind of way that kind of afforded a certain kind of social protection for her, bodily, emotional, etc. Children were another kind of demographic where certain protection is extended toward them culturally. I think we've lost a lot of those kind of built-in cultural protections that allows a person to be vulnerable. And so we find ourselves as women, as of course, many people, men and children also find this too. We have to be protecting ourselves all the time. And that is very important. In the world we live in now, there are many people who don't respect the sanctity of persons and
Yeah.
violate that frequently. And
Mm-hmm.
so we have this tension. And, I don't know, maybe that tension existed hundreds of years ago. I'm not going to be so kind of naive so as to say, oh, 200 years ago it was easy for a woman to be vulnerable. I mean, it's always been a dangerous and scary thing to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
However, it is an incredibly important part of our being able to receive people. And so I feel like, I mean, this can be difficult, a difficult place to be vulnerable, but one place we can practice being vulnerable is in relation to God.
Mm-hmm.
So recognizing that God is our Father and that He's omnipotent, so He's always in charge, but He's always good and He's always there to take care of you. No matter what it seems like, God has your back. This is a big deal for most people to come to grips with, not just women,
Mm-hmm.
but because we all have human fathers. And so our experience of God the Father is through our human father.
Mm-hmm.
And as good as our human father is, he's still a broken man.
Mm-hmm.
And the chances are quite high that we have been wounded by him. And so it's challenging for us to practice vulnerability toward God the Father. But I think that's a really wonderful place for women to start, is to seek a relationship with God the Father that is one of trust and one of dependence, because God truly is good. He is all powerful and he totally has your back. So it's really the one place where you are completely safe being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a beautiful place where we can start experiencing ourselves as daughter, as woman,
Mm-hmm.
in the presence and the protection of God the Father. So that would be the first place that I think that we can practice a kind of an awareness. I think another way that we can develop an awareness of ourselves as women is through role models, um, great heroines in literature who have brought all these things together: talent, gift, intelligence, loving heart. vulnerability, true femininity. So we look for examples in literature. Then, of course, there are the real life examples of the people in our life that we should really be looking. Where are the women that really show me what it means to be the heart of the home,
Mhm.
what it means to be vulnerable, what it means to serve without losing myself? I
Mhm.
think this is part of the reason why people are concerned about serving, because they think it means losing yourself entirely.
Mhm.
It doesn't. You're still present in the serving. I mean, that's when the serving means something. It's when it's you giving something. If the you is not there, it's significantly less powerful. It just becomes practical. You did
Mhm.
my job for me, you know?
Mhm.
So I think that to become strong in who we are and to love who we are because we know that we are loved gives us the strength to move forward into the world with a vulnerability that's willing to look outward.
Mhm.
It's a beginning of an answer to a very big question. It's a
It
big
is.
process.
I'm sorry. It was a big question. That
Yeah.
is a big question. But yeah, bringing in vulnerability, I think, oh, that is so good because it's also so anti-cultural. Like women are told to
Mhm.
be self-sufficient. You're told to be very independent. You got to know how to
Mhm.
do everything, just which I think you should do certain things to be able to live as an adult in a human world or just in the
Yeah,
world. Um,
sure.
but having vulnerability that does bring a softness,
Mhm.
that really does bring a softness. And I think also opens you up to people who might be hurting and don't know who to go to. I think that
Yeah.
vulnerability of, being like, well, I know that she's also open in the way that she struggles, and
Mhm.
she's
Yeah.
able to, I don't know, not be afraid to be there for people and not be this hard
Yeah.
person. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, God the Father. I mean, so I just did an episode with Father Michael Rainier and we talked about God the Father.
Yeah.
And he brought
Yeah.
up the exact same point of like, our fathers, as much as we love them, they're all flawed as well as mothers,
Mhm.
and we're not always the best examples of, that perfect fatherly love or perfect motherly love. And so always going back to God the Father and using him as that cornerstone of what fatherhood is instead of your earthly father and then putting that on God the Father. I think that just
Yeah.
closes the
Yeah.
door to you being able to just let yourself be a woman, let your struggles, put your
Yeah.
struggles at the feet of God the Father, let him just hold them there for you. So
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up. And yeah, you at the end of the podcast that I listened to, the episode about, women being the heart of the home, you touched about like the beauty of femininity. And I love that you said every woman discovers it in their own way. And
Mhm.
the reason that I love that is because I think when women, and maybe the world too, but I think some women see femininity, they're like, oh, well, it looks one way. And so femininity is just weakness or femininity is just this. And it's this one thing,
Mhm.
that they're
Mhm.
like, I can't relate to this or I don't want to relate
Mhm.
to it. Um, and so I love that you brought in vulnerability as one of the ways that women can kind of embark on the journey of discovering their
Yeah.
femininity. Um, and
Yeah.
so
Good. Well, thank you.
yeah, I mean, is there anything else that you think?
Well, while we're on the topic of
Sure.
vulnerability, I do want to add that, I think that, when we're children, our parents give us a rule that we just kind of follow, like don't talk to strangers. And then as you get older, you have to reassess that rule because you
Mhm.
realize, okay, some strangers are okay to talk to, other strangers are not okay to talk to, right? And so
Mhm.
if we take kind of simplistic like sayings or rules that are suited toward children, they're simple, and just kind of apply them to our adult life, we're going to have big problems. And so
Mhm.
we need to learn to be able to discern finer details. So, for example, one of the points that you made that Father was just saying about um, our fathers, our earthly fathers, are flawed. God in heaven, our heavenly Father, is not flawed. We need to be able to make that distinction.
Mhm.
Yes, there's something that my father has in common, my earthly father has in common with God the Father, but God the Father's different, right?
Mhm.
And so we have to be constantly, as adults, when we look at the word vulnerability, I think we need to kind of really look at it with discernment. So obviously it has kind of a primary upfront meaning, like the ability to be wounded, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you say, well, it's a characteristic of femininity to be vulnerable, the ability to be wounded, and then women think that, okay, I'm going to be super feminine. I'm just going to walk around and just let everybody wound me. And that makes me really feminine, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
obviously that sounds kind of extreme and dumb.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel that's a little bit what you were saying about every woman comes to discover her own femininity through her own experience in her own
Mm-hmm.
way,
Mm-hmm.
that it's not generalizations. And so sometimes we have a tendency to want to do that, especially with a lot of social media stuff. Oh, women that succeed look like blah. And then we have all these images that are given to us, or women who are feminine are, or homemakers are in frumpy clothes with an apron, haggard, no makeup, no hair, like holding kids. Okay, sometimes that happens to us with, or it doesn't mean that's what it means to be a mom, right? So we have to be nuanced when we talk about these issues, so that we begin to understand some of the details. Otherwise, you're going to end up throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah.
And as regards to vulnerability, I think it's important to realize that there's going to be concentric circles of people to whom you owe a greater vulnerability. You're not just vulnerable to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be a certain sphere of people that you ought not to be that vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And you, as a mature adult, have to discern that. And not being vulnerable to them doesn't mean hardness or depersonalization and just, or, a justification to be angry, mean, cold, whatever. It just means that it's a different level of vulnerability. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that that's kind of important if people are trying to discover vulnerability in a world where that's not really promoted as something that we want to be or do. So maybe we don't see lots of examples, or maybe our one example of vulnerability is the person who had no boundaries and just never said no to anything, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That would be a bad example of vulnerability, or someone who just let people abuse them over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we're looking for. We're
Mm-hmm.
looking for a healthy example of vulnerability. So I just wanted to say that, lest kind of that word be taken again in this kind of universal simplistic way and just kind of pasted onto women as you must be vulnerable.
Right.
No, it's not something that is pasted on us as we must be. It's actually something that we have within us,
Mm-hmm.
that we need to make room for ourselves experiencing it in safe ways that then can continue to grow outward, in the appropriate expression and in the appropriate relationships.
And I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. Well, continue. Sorry.
Go ahead. No. I want you to say that. And then because you said, what else can we do? And I actually had another thought, but go ahead and finish what you were going to say.
I was just going to say, I love that you brought that up, and I know I'm like, this kind of sounds like everybody should know this, but I feel like not everybody thinks about this, but all words have deep meanings. Like we
Yeah.
really need to think about them when we use them and not think about them in one way, because they do have deep meanings. And yes, sometimes
Yeah.
it's not appropriate to be at this level with this person, in vulnerability as an example, or whatever
Yeah.
the word is. And so, yeah, I think one thing we can definitely take away is, and I think femininity in general is just, there's so much depth that everything that's presented as feminine or woman or, anything like that, think about it deeply from all the angles and how does it apply to your life and how can you step into that? Not how the
Yeah,
world tells you to step into that. How can you do it?
for
Because I'm
sure.
sure it's different and it's beautiful from every woman when they truly do that. So that was all I
Yeah,
was going to
for
say.
sure. No, that's great. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's part of the reason the conversation around femininity is actually a very difficult one.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of words that just kind of cause a knee jerk reaction. And so, and because of people's personal experience, they invest words with a meaning that you might not be meaning that at all when you say it. But when they hear you say the word, immediately their own personal context gives the definition for that word. And that's why it's very difficult to talk about, I think, femininity and vulnerability. For example, if someone has been very wounded by a man, um, that is their experience of vulnerability. So when we talk about, oh, women should be vulnerable, they're going to be going, no way, baby, I'm not being vulnerable. Vulnerable means you get taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that's not what vulnerability means, but in their experience, that's what that word means to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that's part of the reason the conversation is a hard conversation to have, because the words are so loaded with
Hmm.
everyone's personal filter, which is totally understandable. But the other thing that I wanted to mention, that kind of when you said, "Oh, what can we do to help bring that out?" I think one of the ways that women really have a beautiful opportunity to experience vulnerability, is in the context of marriage and in the context of a male female relationship. Now, obviously, it's not the only way you can experience, because there are many women who aren't married or have lost a spouse if they're older, or even some younger women who have lost spouses. That doesn't mean that there's no hope. They're never going to discover their femininity. That's not true.
Hmm.
Kind of the natural context in which a lot of this is experienced is the marriage context. And so a couple of things I want to say about that. First of all, we're talking about women and about what it means to be feminine. But if we talk about it in the context of marriage, you can't really talk about it without talking about the male, the husband,
Yes. Yeah.
because he is kind of, he's what's required for her to be able to fully practice her femininity in a way that's actually fruitful. That his faithfulness, his demeanor to his wife, his creating a protection around her so that it is safe for her to be vulnerable is absolutely critical. So, I mean, there's a really beautiful way. And, if we were talking about what it means to be masculine, to have a woman offer her husband that vulnerability is extraordinary, what that does for a man in discovering his masculinity. But,
Hmm.
we're not focusing on that right now. We're talking about women. And so there is something very extraordinary that happens that really requires for a man to do his part in a faithful way that is truly in keeping with what it means to be a man, that he is called to be responsible for the well-being of his wife and
Hmm.
his children and the whole household. And this is a very big burden. There is a lot that he needs to take into consideration to create a safe place for a woman to be truly what it means to be feminine.
Hmm.
So I think that's very important. Now, I do want to add the kind of flip side to that is that then very often what young women will do is they'll say, "Oh, I need a man in relation with whom I can develop my femininity," and then they start kind of, any man is someone that I owe this vulnerability to. That's not the case. It's really in the context of a covenanted relationship,
Hmm.
where that kind of back and forth between masculinity and femininity can really cause this incredible flourishing. So I just wanted to say that, because I think sometimes in the effort to understand masculinity and femininity in the context of marriage, sometimes some of those principles are applied outside of marriage.
Yeah.
Now, how does it work outside of marriage? Surely it's very much the case that when men really take their role seriously, in relation to the community and how to respect and honor women, um, even women who aren't in that degree of intimacy that a covenanted relationship requires, there is a certain kind of responsibility that men have to respect and honor and make space for. And it's really important that we have that in order for us to have a context in which we experience our own femininity. That doesn't mean that we owe obedience to men that we're not married to. It doesn't mean that we owe total vulnerability to any man just because he's a man, right? That's
Hmm.
what belongs to a covenanted relationship. But
Hmm.
in a certain sense, there's kind of little kind of reflections that are
Hmm.
supposed to happen outside of the marriage covenant that really help men and women discover their masculinity and femininity.
Hmm. Yes. And I think that is also something that people don't think deeply on of,
Mhm.
yes, these things need to be practiced. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a woman, you know, wanting a man to take care of her. I don't think there's anything
Mhm.
wrong with that. Or
Mhm.
for a man to want to have a partner in his life he can come home to, and someone who's, there to hold all his troubles and sit there with him. I don't know. I'm like, why is that such a bad thing? But like you
Yeah.
said, it is only appropriate to the full extent in that covenant between a man and a
Mhm.
woman. And
Mhm.
yet again, in our society, in our modern world, it's kind of cast aside as it's nothing special. There's nothing. except signing the marriage license. Like there's nothing more
Yeah.
to it. And that's so sad because I'm
Yeah.
like, there's so much depth to it that people are
Yeah.
just missing out. Um, well, I wanted to shift gears just a little bit. With some of our feminine and womanly talents and gifts. And I think there's things that you spoke about in your podcast episode, like singing and that gift
Mhm.
that you have, and how can you bring that into your home? Do you think
Mhm.
that these gifts that we have, um, do you think they're important in discovering our femininity in the context of sharing it with the community? Using those
Yeah,
things.
I mean, most especially because to discover those gifts and talents in the context of who I am is about becoming fully yourself. And you can never really give an effective gift to someone if you don't first possess yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, we do it all the time. There are all kinds of ways in which we don't fully possess ourselves, and it's a partial gift. But I do think it is really a beautiful thing for a woman, kind of as an individual person, not just because she's a woman,
Mm-hmm.
to recognize and see her gifts for them. And, if she's recognizing and seeing her gifts and letting them kind of grow, and she's fostering them and sharing them with the communities that are given to her, either her family or the larger community, they're going to be feminine because she's a woman. You know what I mean? And so, for me, singing is a huge part of sharing my heart. I actually have a really big thing about singing. I think that everybody is given a voice. So you were born with an instrument. So I think that means God means for all of us to sing. And the reason I think he wants us to sing is because your body's your instrument. And so it's this incredibly intimate way of sharing your heart, not just sharing with others, but even expressing your heart. And so I I'm putting together some resources on our Lifecraft website to help people who want to sing, who can't sing, to be confident and discover that ability so that they have a vehicle to express their deepest heart. I mean, even if you're just doing it in the shower, I just want to give people permission to sing. So for me, singing that's my particular personal gift, how I love people. And I think my children have said they can feel it when I sing to them. They feel like I'm hugging them. They feel like I'm holding them.
Oh
When
my
I sing,
goodness,
that's what
that's
I'm
so sweet.
trying to do. Anyone who hears me, whether I'm singing at mass, I'm just thinking, I just want people to feel like they're being held by my voice. But that's my particular gift or talent.
Mm-hmm.
And different women have different gifts and talents. And all of them, if we exercise them in a way that it's like an extension of ourselves to help people feel loved and received, there are all kinds of things that, I'm trying to think of other examples of a gift or a talent that someone can have that, let's say someone is an outstanding athlete, a woman is an outstanding athlete. How is she going to use that to exercise her femininity? Well, there are going to be particular contexts. Now, if she's a professional athlete, it's just the professional context isn't really the place where you're going to be able to best exercise your feminine genius for persons. It's just there's a very specific thing you're doing, you do it, and then the door is closed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Although, of course, by her comportment and demeanor, she can say an awful lot by the way she moves her body and even holds her body in stillness
Mm-hmm.
can be an expression of her femininity. But let's say she's outstanding at sports. And so, she's maybe helping kids or she's working with underprivileged teenagers in a, community setting. Her love of physical motion can be expressed by encouraging people to do the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me show you how to do it. Let's play this game together. I'm not particularly inclined to like playing sports with my kids. My kids know if they want to play baseball, they have to ask daddy to play with them. So that's not my level. I can't express to my child, oh, I love you so much, even when I'm playing it with them because I have to. I don't think they're particularly feeling it like me just reaching out, and hugging them. Someone who really loves it and that's their gift, bodily movement, has a way of like seeing that little bit of, oh, you did that really well. And so they can use this gift as a means of bringing up, encouraging, drawing out. I could very well see a woman who's an outstanding athlete being able to say exactly what I just said about singing, about her engagement and teaching people how to move their body. Right. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, pretty much anything that you can think of, I remembered when I was not newly married, I was a new mom. I had maybe 3 children. That's when things got really hard, when I had 3 children, because no one was quite old enough to be able to take care of themselves. I remember experiencing this great frustration because I always wanted to be, my dad always said about me, from ever since you were really little, you always said, all I want to do is sing and dance on stage. And that's true. That's all I ever wanted to do was sing and dance on stage. And, here he was, a mom with 3 kids, so overwhelmed and busy that, like, I mean, forget doing anything career wise. And, I hardly had time to sing anywhere or do anything like that. And I just remember going, Lord, how is it possible that when you started me in my mother's womb, you gave me these gifts and talents just so they could die and become completely obsolete because now I have this vocation to be married and have children? Like, I don't, that seems like a total waste. And that does not seem like our God, who's a good God. Like, why
Mm-hmm.
would you do that? And then I realized that I had to have a mental shift where I always wanted to sing and dance on stage. That was having a career that involved all kinds of things that was mutually exclusive to having a family.
Mm-hmm.
And at least in my context. And I just realized, no, the Lord is giving me opportunities to use my voice. I was singing to my children every day. I ended up teaching homeschooling choirs and where my kids were going to school. Even before they were going to school, we did Christmas plays, pageants, and someone asked me, could you do the music? And so I was singing with all these little kids. Then I started cantering at church. And so there are ways that, in a certain sense, kind of don't check the box. I didn't get my name in the paper. I'm not, my name is not in lights, on Broadway. I don't appear in the newspaper. Nobody knows anything about me, but I'm singing all the time. And it's really kind of pushed me to actually discover, what is your gift? Does your gift only exist if someone's watching and clapping? Or do you really love it? And do you do it wherever you can? And so I just I just feel like women are given a gift, just like every person in their mother's womb. The Lord has designed you from the very beginning with all these particular things that will never be repeated anywhere else. Someone else might have a gift that's similar to you, but the way it comes together in you, it's just never, ever, ever going to happen again. And that's kind of what the Lord is inviting us to do throughout this whole long trajectory of our life, is to become the most who he designed us to be.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't get hung up on, oh, I can't do it that way. I can't do it this way. Well, how are we doing it? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so women have particular gifts. We're persons, and those gifts have to flourish. We're going to do them in a particular way that's always has a heart open to people, people first, people first. How does my gift overflow to encourage, grow women? Not just women, but anyone we encounter. And so I just think, yes, you need to discover what is the desire of your heart. And then, not so that you can just do it for yourself and keep it to yourself, but this desire in your heart, this gift that you have, is for the sake of affirming, bringing up, drawing out the persons that God has put in your life, your home, your community, the larger community.
I
It's a real
think
gift.
I think that brings it so perfectly full circle, because we started out with, this concept of, well, is this all I'm made for? Is to just
Yeah.
be a homemaker and that's it, and whatever.
Mhm.
And you think you have to give up your whole self, and just
Yeah.
kind of put it aside and just focus on children and your husband and your home, and then that's it, but
Yeah.
there's so much more to that, because God wants you to bring that into your home, like all of your gifts, all of your talents. And I think they'll come out one way or the other as you continue to develop as a person,
Yeah.
even, however old you are. I kind of have had the same experience, but with dancing. I used to be a pretty competitive ballet dancer, and I had to choose at one point whether it's going to be school or it's going to be dance. And I was
Sure.
like, well, let's just do school, because also dance is very expensive. But
Yeah.
that was the one thing that was just my passion. And I ended up getting injured in college with sports, and, that's a whole big story.
Mhm.
But I was like, am I never going to be able? I didn't lose that passion. for ballet and for
Mhm.
dance. And so, I thought, am I never going to be able to use this? Is this it? Am I just going to have to sit there and cry over the Nutcracker every Christmas because I can't do it
Yeah.
anymore?
Aw.
Um, no, I don't. I'm just kidding. I don't cry over the Nutcracker, but I do have that pull. It reminds me. This was
Mhm.
something you used to be able to do, but it looks very different now. I was able to teach ballet classes for little girls, and now there's a lot of dancing in the kitchen, and the girls are wanting to
Yeah.
learn and all this stuff, and it's just, God is so good because he gives you
Yeah.
something, and even if it goes totally wrong like it did in my case where I can't do it the way that I want to do it, um I still am able to use it and see such beautiful results. I just think God is so
Yeah.
good, and I think it's just going to continue. If we keep diving into ourselves and our abilities, we're just going to continue to flourish.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll add to that just partially from my own personal experience and because I'm wondering, I think there might be a lot of women who have the same experience that, we get into this circumstance and it's not always with marriage and children. It can also be, if you're not married and you have a profession where all of a sudden you're like, what do I want? What am
Mm-hmm.
I good at? What are my strengths? And that's very difficult to be in that situation. And I think there are all kinds of ways in which we begin to discover what are, and there's so many great books out there to help you discover what is your inner heart and all that kind of stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to mention, I think that's one of the things that we as moms get to do. If we really are present and my mom had 10 children in 15 years and she was a Juilliard piano performance major and she was an outstandingly gifted pianist who was on the way to a really outstanding career when she got married
Wow.
and then had 10 children in 15 years. And I remember saying to my mom one time, "Oh, how did you do it?" And she said, "First of all, I stopped feeling sorry for myself. Second of all, I stopped living on the periphery of my life. Kind of on the outside, I was trying to do something else and then kind of taking care of the kids and getting it done while I was trying to be turned outward." She said,
Mm-hmm.
"I stopped living on the periphery of my life. I jumped into the stream with both feet. I just owned it and I really did it." I think when women really do that and really turn toward their children with their whole heart, we become a means in which it's almost like we're a mirror that we hold up to children. Children don't know what are my gifts, what are my talents, what are my vocations. God designed it so that the parents are almost like a mirror that we hold up to the child. And it's through the parent that the child begins to discover who they are. And so, if we really, as moms, really commit to that, we see our children and I like the word educe because we're bringing something out of them. It's something that's already there. God gave
Mm-hmm.
them that. But by being this sensitive, vulnerable, insightful being in their child's life, we actually have this means to bring that out in them so that by the time they're married and having children, they're not going, "Wow, what do I like? I don't know what my talents are. What should I be doing?" Right? There's
Mm-hmm.
already a kind of a sense of who you are in a really profound and important way. And so that's, just to go back and say, well, why, what's, you know, people don't really think that being a homemaker is that important. Well, just that aspect alone
Mm-hmm.
is that you can be helping people, your children, to see who they are, understand it and appreciate it. So when the time comes and they kind of leave the nest, they already have a strong sense of that. And it's not a crisis while you're trying to do a million other things to try to figure out who the heck you are.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one of the great privileges and joys in parenting because being a homemaker is you get to be the person who brings the child out, but you also get to witness it.
Mm-hmm.
Because even to you, it's kind of like oh my gosh, that's so amazing. You're good at blah, or you're so incredible at that. It's just a treat. We don't know what our
Mm-hmm.
children are going to be.
Yeah.
And so it's really an exciting moment to be able to witness that.
Yes. Yes. Well, to sum it all up, I guess if you could give women one piece of advice, it could be on this topic, but it could also be on anything else. What would that advice be?
Hmm. I think maybe what I would say is to practice first vulnerability towards yourself. Be gentle and loving. Really practice opening your heart to yourself. You are beautiful. You are good. You are gift. And there's a beautiful plan for you. whichever direction practically you go, who knows exactly which path the Lord hasn't planned for you, but you are an incredible gift. And like we said earlier, it's never going to happen again in all of creation, this thing that's you. And so, my desire for all of our listeners is that you experience yourself as that, and that you have the confidence to grow in that goodness and beauty, and mostly just wishing you joy in the discovery of the gift that you are.
Well, Sofia, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this beautiful topic with us.
Oh, it's absolutely my privilege. Thank you for having me, Anna. It was really a delight to speak with you.
And thank you so much for listening to the Woman Aesthetic Podcast. Let's connect on Instagram at the Woman Aesthetic Pod. And if you're loving the podcast, I would absolutely be honored if you go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button and leave me a review. Until next time.